Will leaving the EU change the standard of food we eat? Could new post-Brexit trade deals mean that in our takeaways, restaurants and supermarkets, we see stuff like chlorinated chicken and hormone-fed beef? Should we be worried about our health? And what impact could cheaper imported food with lower standards have on British farmers? The UK is one of the leading countries in the world when it comes to animal welfare, thanks to a range of laws and regulations. Around 12,000 regulations in UK law have come from the EU, preventing things like cloning farm animals, adding growth hormones to pigs and cows, and washing chickens in chlorine. The government says it plans to keep these high standards for food produced in the UK after Brexit, but there are concerns that in order to seal trade deals with countries including the US, the UK's biggest trading partner after the EU, the government will allow imports of meat from countries with lower standards of animal welfare.
If we start bringing in chickens from other countries that aren't grown to the same standards as us, it's a lottery. You just don't know what you're eating.
Mark Gorton runs one of the largest free-range poultry farms in the UK with 1 million chickens. He's concerned that importing cheaper farmed goods with lower standards could put UK farmers out of business or force them to compromise on standards.
If we have to compete with poultry that's grown to lower welfare standards than us, the risk would be that it could well be a race to the bottom.
UK farmers like Mark don't want cheaper imported foods like chlorinated chicken from the US ending up on our plates. But what actually is chlorinated chicken?
The policy in the US is to encourage farmers to produce meat as cheaply as possible, and it is cheaper to cram a lot of animals into any available space. And when packed together at high density, the animals are very vulnerable to catching infections and spreading infections amongst themselves. To prevent those bacteria making consumers ill, often the meat is washed with chemicals that are intended to disinfect them.
So is it safe? The US Food and Drug Administration and European Food Safety Authority say the amount of chlorine residue that's left on chicken meat is okay for human consumption. In fact, most bagged supermarket salads in the UK have been chlorine washed. So the main concern for people's health isn't the chlorine, but the bacteria that the chlorine is supposed to be removing because of poor hygiene standards, like Salmonella, E. coli and Campylobacter. But how effective is this process?
A very important piece of research came out of Southampton University from a team that showed that using chlorine wash to try to kill bacteria was completely ineffective. The remarkable thing is that the chlorine wash didn't kill or even slow down the bacteria, but what it did was block the standard test by which the presence of bacteria is routinely detected. And therefore, the tests that they were conducting were giving misleading assurances, giving the illusion that the food was safe when it actually remained seriously contaminated.
For Mark and his 1 million chickens, a chlorine wash is something he'd never consider.
There's no need for any chlorine washes on these chickens because of the way they're grown in clean and hygienic conditions. So when we process our birds in our factories, we just use normal tap water to wash them, just the same as you would at home in your kitchen.
Okay, let's put chlorinated chicken to one side for a minute and look at the other differences in how animals in the US are reared compared to the UK. When it comes to cattle, the UK has banned the use of growth-promoting hormones, whilst in the US they're allowed along with beta agonists, which reduce fat and increase muscle. For pigs, in the UK, sow stalls, which are crates for pregnant pigs, are banned, whereas they're allowed in the majority of US states. And in the US, the drug ractopamine, which promotes lean meat, is also permitted for use, whereas it's banned in the UK.
A thorough scientific study by a European panel showed that, well, in relation to one of the hormones, there was clear evidence that it was a risk to a significant proportion of consumers. As for the other hormones, there wasn't sufficient evidence that it was safe.
So why is it deemed safe in the US and not in Europe?
There's a very interesting comparison between the assessment in Europe and the assessment in the USA. The US assessment only assesses the risks to average healthy adults. The European assessment recognises that the European population does not consist solely of average healthy adults, and they assess the risk to broader population groups, and in relation to some of those groups showed that the beef hormones were not safe.
So back to Brexit. The UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson says leaving the EU will bring new freedoms for UK farmers.
We have an amazing opportunity to increase our agricultural exports around the world.
However, the government's promise to protect the UK's high food standards isn't law yet. That's because the agriculture bill hasn't been passed, specifically the Animal Welfare Amendment, which was initially defeated by the Commons in May 2020. Animal welfare charities, including the RSPCA, are pushing for food imports with lower standards not to be allowed in the UK as part of any post-Brexit trade deal.
It's a source of real frustration for not just the RSPCA, but also a cause of concern for the public. 8 out of 10 members of the public tell us they don't want to see lower welfare products from countries like the USA, and it's not just the public that agrees with that. Supermarkets have come out to say that they won't sell products such as chlorinated chicken or hormone-fed beef.
But even if the supermarkets don't stock them, what about takeaways? With 1 in 10 Brits heading out for a takeout at least once a week, will the source of the meat they're eating be clear? Whether we see the likes of chlorinated chicken or hormone-fed beef will depend on the outcome of the agriculture bill. It's going through Parliament at the moment and is expected to become law in November 2020, and its outcome will be closely watched by animal welfare charities and British farmers like Mark.